The life of an INFJ unfolds in quiet, profound seasons, each stage rich with emotion, questions, and transformation. Unlike more externally driven personality types, INFJs don't move through life in predictable, linear steps. They move through internal seasons just as deeply as external ones. Their path is rarely visible from the outside, but within, they are constantly shifting, evolving, and becoming. In the early years of childhood, the INFJ often senses that they are different, though they might not have words for it yet. They tend to be observant and unusually aware of emotional undercurrents, often picking up on adult moods, unspoken tensions, or the sadness behind someone's eyes. They feel things that no one else around them seems to acknowledge. It can be confusing at first, even isolating. They may become the quiet child, the thoughtful one, the one who asks deep questions when others are still playing pretend. The world around them may label them old soul, too sensitive, or shy, not realizing that these early signs are actually the beginning of a powerful inward journey. To unlock the power of your INFJ personality, check out our INFJ Mastery course and INFJ ebook. The links are in the description of this video. As INFJs move into adolescence, their inner life becomes more complex. This is a time when they begin to wrestle deeply with identity. While other teenagers are trying on trends and personas to figure out who they are, the INFJ is already several layers deeper, asking not just who they are, but why they are. They may begin journaling obsessively, analyzing the world, and reflecting on meaning. Often, this is a time of silent turmoil. They feel misunderstood, too intense, too quiet. They crave meaningful relationships, yet struggle to find people who truly get them. While peers bond over superficialities, INFJs are yearning for soul-level connection. This disconnect can lead to loneliness, but also a kind of personal awakening. It is during this stage that many INFJs begin to understand that their sensitivity is not a weakness, but a different kind of intelligence. Young adulthood brings with it a strange duality for INFJs. On one hand, they are expected to start defining themselves outwardly through career choices, education, relationships. But on the inside, they're still navigating a labyrinth of purpose. They may feel pressured to choose a path, even as they sense that the right path hasn't revealed itself yet. The INFJ does not simply want a job. They want meaningful work. They don't just want a date. They want soul connection. And when those things don't come quickly, they often feel out of place in a world that seems to reward speed, ambition, and visibility. This stage is often marked by tension between what society expects and what their soul knows it needs. But it is also the beginning of an important awakening. INFJs begin to see that their internal compass is more trustworthy than external approval. In their late 20s or early 30s, many INFJs enter a deeply introspective stage. This is often the time of emotional shedding. They begin releasing old roles, relationships, and identities that no longer align. It's not always a graceful process. There may be moments of breakdown, spiritual questioning, career shifts, and endings that feel like heartbreak. But through this, something remarkable begins to happen: clarity. For perhaps the first time, the INFJ starts claiming who they really are, not based on who they should be, but based on who they feel themselves to be at the core. This is where their inner power begins to stabilize. They begin to set boundaries. They start saying no. They learn that solitude is sacred, not something to apologize for. And they begin building a life that reflects their values instead of someone else's expectations. In midlife, INFJs often step into their quiet mastery. They have seen enough, felt enough, and healed enough to recognize their own patterns. The questions haven't stopped, but now they are rooted in wisdom rather than confusion. Relationships become more selective, more nourishing. Work is no longer just a means of survival. It becomes a platform for legacy, impact, or deep service. The INFJ may find themselves mentoring, teaching, or creating in ways that help others navigate the same struggles they once walked through alone. They are less interested in proving themselves and more interested in being themselves fully. This stage often brings a sense of calm, not because life is easy, but because they've learned how to live it with intention. In the later years of life, INFJs embody something sacred, a presence that feels both grounded and expansive. They've become keepers of wisdom, quiet observers who understand that not everything needs to be said, and not every storm needs to be fought. There's a softness to them, but also a gravity. They've let go of the pressure to fit in or explain themselves. Instead, they live in alignment with what truly matters. These are often their most creative, intuitive, and spiritually attuned years, not in the outward sense, but in the soul's unfolding. Many INFJs in this stage return to writing, art, mentoring, or healing, not for fame or profit, but because expression becomes a sacred offering. They live with the kind of peace that comes only from having walked through the fire and returned with the light. And through all these stages, one truth remains constant. The INFJ is not defined by what the world sees, but by what they carry quietly. Their life may look simple on the surface, but inside, they are galaxies. Always feeling, always sensing, always growing. And at every stage, they are becoming more of who they've always been: soft, strong, intuitive, and deeply, beautifully rare. Unlike many others who measure their life in achievements, status, or outward milestones, INFJs experience life in layers. Their evolution is deeply internal, marked not just by what changes around them, but by what awakens within. For them, every life stage isn't just a chapter, it's a transformation. And each season comes with its own questions, its own quiet revelations. In early childhood, the INFJ begins to sense the dissonance between what people say and what they actually feel. This is when their gift of intuition first stirs, subtle but strong. They pick up on things other children don't. They may sit in a room full of laughter and still feel the tension between adults. They notice microexpressions, the pauses in speech, the way energy shifts when someone enters or exits. No one teaches them this. They just know. But because they can't always explain it, they start to believe there's something off about them. And so, early on, many INFJs learn to mask, smiling when they're uneasy, staying silent even when their inner world is screaming. As they enter their school years and adolescence, INFJs begin their first major inner conflict, the tug-of-war between wanting to be accepted and needing to be authentic. They see how the world rewards conformity, popularity, charm, but they are drawn to depth, honesty, complexity. While others chase social circles, INFJs are lost in books, music, daydreams. They begin asking questions that feel too big for their age. Why am I here? What's the point of all this? Why do I feel so much when others seem untouched? And often, they keep those questions to themselves, afraid they'll be seen as strange, or worse, broken. This stage can be painfully lonely, not because they don't have people around them, but because the conversations that feed them rarely happen. What they hunger for, soul contact, emotional truth, shared stillness, isn't easy to find. In early adulthood, when the world demands definition, INFJs feel the tension between structure and spirit. Everyone seems to have a plan, a 5-year goal, a path, a blueprint. Meanwhile, the INFJ is still trying to make sense of their own sensitivity. They want a purpose, not a paycheck. They crave work that reflects who they are, not just what they can do. But these desires don't always fit into neatly packaged career paths. So they wrestle. They take jobs that drain them. They enter relationships that don't feed them. And all the while, they carry this invisible yearning. There has to be more. This stage is often filled with quiet breakdowns, on commutes, in grocery store parking lots, at night, while the rest of the world sleeps. But beneath the breakdown is a breakthrough. Something ancient and true begins to surface, the call to alignment. Mid-adulthood for the INFJ is often where the shedding begins. They grow tired of wearing masks, of people-pleasing, of holding emotional weight that was never theirs to carry. This is when boundaries begin to form, not out of bitterness, but from a sacred sense of self-respect. They start to choose peace over performance. Solitude becomes a sanctuary, not a punishment. They reevaluate their friendships. They cut cord from past versions of themselves. And often, they begin building something new, not just a life, but a legacy. Whether it's writing, counseling, parenting, teaching, or simply living with more intention, INFJs in this stage begin pouring their energy into what feels real. Not for applause, not for validation, but because their soul refuses to settle for anything less. And then there's the late stage INFJ, the sage, the mystic, the seer. They've walked through fire and returned with a softness that only survivors carry. Their power no longer demands to be seen. It's felt. They don't chase connection. They embody it. They know how to sit in silence without discomfort. They've made peace with their past. They've forgiven themselves for all the years they abandoned their own needs to keep others comfortable. Now, they choose softness as an act of strength. They mentor quietly. They guide without trying. They radiate wisdom without ever needing to speak it. These final stages are not about slowing down. They're about deepening, returning, becoming fully themselves after a lifetime of navigating a world that often didn't know what to do with someone so inwardly rich. They no longer chase meaning. They are meaning. Their life becomes a kind of prayer. Slow, honest, deliberate. Throughout every stage, the INFJ's journey is one of constant returning to their intuition, to their depth, to their sense of purpose. The world may change. The roles may shift. But what stays true is this. The INFJ is here not just to live, but to feel, to see, to transform, and to heal, starting with themselves and radiating outward. The INFJ life begins in subtle observation. Even in childhood, INFJs feel like witnesses rather than participants. They are often the ones who notice the emotion behind someone's eyes, or the tension in a room long before anyone else speaks. This ability to sense beyond the surface makes them incredibly emotionally intelligent, but also deeply vulnerable. Because they feel so much, so young, INFJs often learn early how to hide what they're sensing. Not out of fear, but out of an intuitive understanding that the world may not be ready for what they know. So they become quiet, reflective, careful. They watch others. They study the world's rhythm. And even when they play or laugh, a part of them is always somewhere else. In their minds, building imaginary worlds, or in their hearts, trying to make sense of the unspoken. As they grow older, this inner world only becomes more complex. In their teenage years, INFJs often experience an internal collision between longing and disillusionment. They long for connection that feels real, for relationships that speak the language of the soul. But they also start to see how rare that kind of connection is. They may try to fit in, mimic the behavior of others, or engage in surface-level friendships, only to feel emptier afterward. It's not that they dislike people. It's that they can feel when something is performative, and their spirit aches for authenticity. This often leads to early heartbreak, not just romantic, but existential. A slow realization that they may never fully be understood. They start to sense that the world is built for speed, noise, and certainty, while they are built for depth, stillness, and questioning. And so, many INFJs develop a kind of inner loneliness, not because they are alone, but because so few seem capable of meeting them where they live, beneath the surface. As they enter early adulthood, this loneliness often turns into a quest. INFJs begin searching for meaning everywhere, in books, careers, spirituality, relationships. But even as they search, they're incredibly hard on themselves. They want to make the right choice. They want every step to align with their values, their purpose, their vision for the life they imagine. This pressure to get it right can lead to analysis paralysis. While others move confidently in one direction, the INFJ may hesitate, trying to feel their way forward. They often take jobs that don't satisfy them, relationships that don't nourish them, or paths that others expect of them. And then, quietly, they begin to unravel, not in a dramatic way, but in small, aching moments. A panic attack at work, tears after another emotionally empty day, a journal entry that reads like a goodbye to the version of themselves they've been pretending to be. And from that unraveling, something sacred begins, the remembering. They begin to remember who they were before they adapted to survive, before they learned to tone themselves down, before they became caretakers for everyone else's comfort. And with that remembering comes a fierce longing to return, not backward, but inward. They want to reclaim their voice, their solitude, their purpose. And so, They begin to rebuild, not loudly, but with quiet conviction. Midlife for the INFJ is often their most powerful turning point. This is when they begin to say no with confidence, when they stop explaining their choices, when they finally give themselves permission to rest, to create, to set boundaries, to be whole, not for others, but for themselves. The relationships that once drained them fall away. The expectations that once caged them dissolve. And in that space, the INFJ begins to root into who they truly are. They often rediscover their creativity, writing, painting, designing, mentoring. They seek work that aligns with their ethics, their inner rhythm, and they attract people, not many, but the right ones, who recognize their soul and honor their depth. Their life becomes less about proving and more about being. They are no longer chasing purpose. They are living it. And then, in the later stages of life, INFJs become keepers of wisdom. They are no longer concerned with being understood. They are concerned with understanding. They listen more than they speak. They don't argue. They observe. They don't force. They flow. They live slowly, tenderly, intentionally. People are drawn to them, not because they're trying to lead, but because their presence alone teaches. They embody peace, not because they've avoided pain, but because they've met it again and again and learned how to carry it gently. They become guides for others, not with instruction, but with example. Their lives speak without shouting. In this final stage, INFJs are not weighed down by regret. They carry the past with reverence. They understand their scars as part of their sacred architecture. They know now that their depth was never a flaw, that their sensitivity was never a weakness. It was always their gift. To unlock the power of your INFJ personality, check out our INFJ Mastery course and INFJ ebook. The links are in the description of this video.